All right, I think it is time to get this moving. So let's move along. Happy New Year, everyone, and happy new first season. I'm Teresa Bateman, First Regional Director in the Greater San Francisco Bay Area, and I'm so excited to be with you to launch the 2021 First California Workshop Series, Product Development and Design Thinking. As we all know well, the pandemic has created many challenges, but it also created opportunities to be creative and innovative in how we engage with the world and in our own robotics community. This workshop series was designed to take advantage of our virtual world and reach out to support all of our California First Tech Challenge and First Robotics competition teams. So this workshop, as you can see, is action-packed here, brings together our industry best practices in product development and a creative problem-solving process with human-centered focus through design thinking. The workshop series applies directly to the innovation challenge for First Robotics competition teams. It may also be applied to the game design challenge, where your new product is a new FRC game. We hope you stay with us throughout this 6-week journey, but if you miss a session, check out a recording. We will again be recording our main sessions only, but not the collaborative breakouts. After each session, there will be homework for your team to do to prepare you for the next session in the workshop series. And at the end of this series, we will also match each California team with a team advisor. We'll talk about the details of that in the future weeks here. But again, we have quite a great program planned and we're excited for you to be here. So to kick off our first California workshop series, it's a pleasure to introduce our next speaker. Aine Shivnan joined Qualcomm in 2009 and currently serves as the VP of Program Management at Qualcomm Research, where she's responsible for strategy and operations, particularly of AI research programs for mobile and cloud edge devices. Aine also served on Qualcomm's Women's Leadership Council and is a strong supporter of STEM initiatives, including being a volunteer judge for First Tech Challenge. Aine hopes to encourage girls and youth around the world to follow their academic interests to a career in engineering. So without further ado, please join me in warmly welcoming Aine Shivnan.
Thank you, Teresa, for that lovely welcome. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm delighted to be here today, connecting again personally for the 5th year in a row with the great FIRST community. As Teresa mentioned, I really enjoyed being a judge at the San Diego First Tech Challenge tournaments and regionals. And honestly, I'm the one that always comes away inspired by the energy, enthusiasm for engineering that's on display at those events. It's just amazing. So you may ask, who is Qualcomm? One way of trying to grasp that is to consider that billions, maybe trillions of times a day, people around the world touch something that's made better by Qualcomm Technologies. It could be the smartphone in your hand, the tablet on your desk, or that action camera on your helmet. We're engineers, scientists, and business strategists, and we come from diverse cultures and have, unique perspectives. And of course, together then we focus on a single goal, and that is to invent breakthrough technologies that transform how the world connects, computes, and communicates. Every 10 years or so, mobile makes a major technology leap forward. We led the mobile industry into the digital age. We connected the smartphone to the internet, and by putting a mobile computer in your pockets. And now we're taking this innovation to virtually every other industry. Our strategy is to invest in the fundamental technologies that enable industries to use cellular and then scale it worldwide. And we see that our inventions benefit the world in 3 ways. We enable customers, we transform industries, and enrich lives. Consumers experience amazing benefits from Qualcomm inventions, ones that are integral to our everyday lives, such as what I just mentioned, connecting phones to the internet 24/7, but then expanding that for application downloads, location services, video streaming, and so on, as well as something which may seem as simple as photo sharing, which has gone from being an initial curiosity to now being essential. So that's an example of how our technologies have helped drive the creation of innovative services such as some of these that I've listed here. But we go from there to newer and different applications like virtual reality, for example. So when Qualcomm makes a breakthrough, this benefits the marketplace at large, and so lots of new products and options emerge. A major focus for us this past number of years has been 5G. And with that technology, wireless becomes the superior network technology, disrupting everything. And it enables a world where virtually everyone and everything is intelligently connected. In May 2020, more than 1.7 billion students were studying remotely. So that brought a lot of attention to the broadband gap that exists in education. And 5G will be a powerful part of the solution to this global societal need to ensure that the next generation are ready for the future. Last year, different than any other year before, there was over 1 billion virtual healthcare interactions. So this shift in care delivery is expected to continue with projections that 50% of all healthcare interactions will be virtual by 2030. Now, besides engineering and technology, we also focus on business and entrepreneurial innovation. Our wireless reach programs engage with underserved communities globally to enhance the delivery of healthcare, enrich teaching and learning, and foster entrepreneurship that can strengthen economic and social developments everywhere. As you know, our engineers work to enable you, the engineers of tomorrow. Hundreds of Qualcomm staff hours were donated in support of design and architecture development to enable First Tech Challenge teams to create and control their robots using smartphones powered by our Snapdragon processor. Additionally, the Vuforia platform that many of you are familiar with was pioneered by Qualcomm, and I'm proud to personally having been part of both those efforts. This quote is often attributed to Einstein, but even if he didn't say these exact words, the phrase really appeals to me. Another way of saying it is engineering plus fun equals
Is this the right class?
So here's a short clip of some fun we had when we asked a team of first students to help us build a Rube Goldberg machine that would celebrate our shared spirit of breakthrough inventions. All right, well, here's a potentially trick question for you. Where can you go with perseverance and ingenuity? Well, as it happens, you can go to Mars. Ingenuity is a tiny helicopter that's been built around our Snapdragon flight board, and according to NASA, will be the first aircraft to attempt controlled flight on another planet. So pretty exciting stuff. But now, over to you, the next generation of inventors. We can't wait to see what you'll invent. Thank you.
Thank you, Anya, for your inspiring words and also for your gracious time as a first volunteer. Now let's see what the plan is for our session 1 here, strategy and navigation. Dave Berggren of FIRST will give a summary of the Innovation Challenge criteria, and we'll have a few minutes for some Q&A. Next, we'll look forward to learning about design thinking by our friends David Song and Amy Zhou from Stanford. Next, I'll provide an overview of intellectual property and wrap up our time together before joining an optional Q&A session with Aine Shivnan, who's graciously offered to spend additional time with you if you'd like at 3 p.m. here. So let's get started. And I'd like to introduce David Berggren, our Senior Regional Director of First California.
Thanks so much, Teresa. So super exciting. Hope everyone had an opportunity to tune into the kickoff today, and where we all got to learn a little bit more about our challenges. Certainly our primary focus here today is supporting you all through the new innovation challenge presented by Qualcomm, and really focusing on our theme for this year of game changers, with challenges all to revolutionize the traditional world of sports and fitness, innovating ways that we can play, move to reach our individual and physical or mental health goals. So kind of setting the context for what we're trying to, kind of problems we're trying to solve here. A couple things that we did want to share on this is a challenge that is open to both FTC and FRC teams, but we did want to let you all know, in case you hadn't heard already, that these FTC teams are not directly competing with FRC teams. So you'll be in separate judging groups. The FTC group size is going to be targeted around 15 to 30 teams, where the FRC judging group size will be, you'll be competing against approximately 20 to 30 teams. Across both programs, teams are placed into non-geographic randomized groups to compete. So this is similar to the way that divisions and things are done at championship. And then lastly, in addition to our workshop that we're doing here, sort of walking you through the process of product development, there is also the first Innovation Challenge content series. And this is a panels, Q&A sessions, and webinars, and really are complementary to our guided hands-on First California workshop series that you're involved with here today. So check, if you haven't had a chance, check out the innovation content series coming up there. Great, so I think we got everything there. So we did want to talk about some of the key dates coming up with the Innovation Challenge. So the first big one is that February 4th is the submission portal opens. So there are separate submission portals for both FTC and FRC, but the date that those open are the same. They are February 4th. So that's the first time that you can actually submit. March 4th is the deadline for teams to submit their entry and finalize their summary for the game design challenge. Submission is also due on the same date. And one thing I do want to mention on the game design challenge is, although this workshop series is primarily focused on supporting the innovation challenge, the product development design processes could be similarly applied to the game design challenge. So there is some benefits there. If you have folks on your teams that are working on the game design challenge, it could be a benefit for them to go through this workshop series as well. And then in late March and early April, the judging interviews will take place. Details and schedule to are forthcoming. So stay tuned for specific dates on that, but there will be some variation in regions, and but they'll be over that month there. April 21st is the deadline for semifinalists. So if you're advancing in the Innovation Challenge, there is a new deadline for the semifinalists to submit further requirements on April 21st. And then May 7th, the 20 finalists from FLL, FTC, and FRC are chosen for the first Global Innovation Awards. And then those Global Innovation Awards are taking place on June 28th through June 30th of 2021. Next up, we wanted to take a look at the kind of the criteria and judging guidelines for the Innovation Challenge. So a problem or opportunity needs to be clearly outlined with supporting evidence. Teams will need to create a business model, which includes a distinct value proposition, feasibility of the model, and a description of factors/resources for implementation. The innovation impacts, so how is this impacting the greater community? So it shows a deep understanding of how it will create impact by making life better or improving life. and then a design. So an effective, functional, and overall comprehensive design accounts for reliability and user experience. But a physical model is not required. We did want to make sure we mentioned. And then the business pitch is the last component here, where this will be a live pitch with the recommended use of visuals. And this pitch will be done to judges. So all of this will be submitted. Well, actually the problem, opportunity, the business model, innovation impact, the design will all be submitted prior, and then there will be a judge interview with the business pitch and an opportunity for the judges to do a Q&A session with your presenters. Judges are looking for the next, are not looking really for the next big idea or disruptive innovation. They're really judging based off of the predictive outcomes of your innovation. Oh, sorry, not judging on the predictive outcomes of your innovation. Whether or not team solution is likely to go to market is not really considered. But what is important is concisely articulating all of the outlined requirements that you see here. So I did want to open it up for some questions. And if you could submit your questions in chat, that would be great. If we don't get to all of our questions before we run out of our allotted time here, I will be sure to try to get the answers to those. And in all fairness, I will say, I know almost as much as you all do now, having hopefully watched kickoff and reading your game manuals, but might have a little additional insight. So the question came up, through active play or movement, what exactly do they mean by that? Does that mean the product must involve some sort of movement, physical activity, or part of the movement, physical activity, or part of the consumer, rather than a product that addresses a problem in the community that does not involve movement? And the wording is a bit confusing, yeah. So I think really they're looking at, where did I see a good description of that? So, so this means redefining where and how we move and play. So we actively play and move ourselves, but also as a community to attain optimum health. This means inventing and invention means inventing and innovating places, ways, sports, tools, and concepts so people of all abilities and skill levels can thrive through active play and movement. So the idea is that we're actively, really, I think, ourselves moving and playing, right? So, but it's helping others do that. It's creating spaces, tools, concepts that are allowing folks to do that. So hopefully that helps answer that a little bit. And Teresa, if I run out of time here, please let me know. Does it have to be a tangible product, or can it be interactive app, site, program, etc.? So this hasn't directly been addressed, but from my understanding, this can be any product. So it doesn't have to be, well, I take this back. I know it does not have to be a physical product. So it could be an app, it could be a website, it could be some, anything that's going to help encourage that active play and movement. So yeah, it does not have to be a physical product or a tangible product. If you focus on improving mental health, how explicit does the connection between your product and mental health have to be? Could it be something that simply makes you happier, or does it have to be more tangible? So, I mean, that's something that I think you really want to define. What aspect of mental health are you addressing? So if we look at mental health overall, what provides mental health? And if you can identify one particular area that you're focusing on. And again, I think the sky's sort of the limit here, but it's one of those things that has to be well researched, has to be, well documented as far as the problem. And then you're going to want to articulate that to the judges. All right, I see Teresa back. Time to move on.
Yes, excellent questions. And I think, we don't obviously have the answers to all of them, but the innovation challenge is really designed to be, very pie in the sky. And we're really excited to see a very broad range of solutions that are presented. So continue to jot down your questions. And in the meantime, we are going to move on to learn about design thinking. And I'd love to introduce David and Aine from Stanford to take it away.
I'm just going to share the presentation real quick. All right. Okay, so our presentation today is about design thinking. For the first two steps, empathize and define. And just for message, if you have any questions, just enter them into the chat and we'll get to them at the end of the presentation. So as I said, today we'll be focusing on the first two steps of design thinking, which is empathize and define. Oh, sorry, this is the wrong. Okay, 1 second.
Wow, that was a fast lecture there.
Yeah. All right. Yep. All right. So we're just going to introduce ourselves a little bit. We're Stanford students who are passionate about robotics.
So my name is David. I'm a rising junior at Stanford studying computer science. I myself was a first alumni a couple years ago, and did it all through high school on Team 295, which is close to Sacramento, California. I like to play tennis, like to run, and work on startups in my free time. I'm actually working on a company right now with some close friends that I made on my FRC team. So I think FIRST is an amazing program, and I actually really like the new format this year. Even though it doesn't have the thrill of going to competitions or building robots, I think it's a really cool opportunity to build something with your friends. It's like a little bit different from robots. Yeah. On to you, Amy.
All right. My name is Amy. I'm in Davis, California, and I'm currently a sophomore. I'm majoring in product design engineering with a minor in music, and some things I enjoy are hiking, classical music, animals, sustainability, design, playing the clarinet, arts and crafts, and one of my favorite foods is coffee. All right, so on to David's part. Oh, sorry, this is my part. So first I'll give a brief overview of what design thinking is and the 5 different steps. There's empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and test. The empathize mode is the work you do to understand the people within the context of your design challenge. The define mode of the design process is all about bringing clarity and focus to the design space. It's your chance and responsibility as a design thinker to define the challenge you're taking on based on what you have learned about your user and about the context. Ideate is the mode of the design process in which you concentrate on idea generation. The prototype mode is the iterative generation of artifacts intended to answer questions that you get closer to your final solution. And finally, the test mode is when you solicit feedback about the prototypes you have created from your users and have other opportunities to gain empathy for the people who you're designing for. All right, and on to today's focus, which is empathize, which David will be presenting, and define, which I will be presenting.
All right. So yeah, at a high level, design thinking is a framework you use to just build great solutions to problems that actually matter. So the empathize part is the fun, is one of the fun parts here because it's a bit of a paradox. You're trying to figure out problems that you may not have realized you've known before. So empathize means to really learn from other people, to relate to them, figure out what matters to them and what kind of problem would be really meaningful for you to solve and something that you'd be interested in. The another part is you can actually empathize with yourself too, and that's actually something that can be really challenging at times. So uh, if you split empathize into three different actions, you can empathize by observing people and seeing what they do. For example, if you're watching an athlete at a sports game or watching someone practice, they have different routines, different emotions, and there's reasons behind the things they do. Another way you could empathize with other people is by engaging with them. You can talk to them, interact with them, ask questions, get them to think about why they do the things they do, learn about what they found to be challenging, what their pet peeves are, what are some things they want to be better, what are the biggest improvements that they could get. And lastly, you could also immerse yourself and do the same experiences that like athletes are doing, or that's like an ultimate way of relating to your user is by doing the same things. You can go on the next slide. So I want to run through some tips, and after doing a little bit of overview on how to empathize, you guys will have the opportunity to practice in a breakout room where we're going to be doing a practice interview, so you can give interviewing a shot and empathize with someone, which I hope everyone can do here. So at the high level for empathize, this is the level where we're trying to understand what our users are, choose what users you're going to go be targeting, and figure out what's important to them. So it's like at this stage, it's really important to keep an open mind, to ask questions, like even ask the dumb questions, because many times we'll be going into a field that we don't know much about. So it's really good to be able to pick up and pick the brains of experts and people who are doing things like on a day-to-day. So like, for example, if I was building wanted to build a company in like the real estate space, I'd be going in with like no background at all, and we need to learn a lot from our users. It's really important when you talk to people to really listen to what they say and not project too much onto them. Like, you're learning from them, and every moment you have them is an opportunity to learn. So take notes, make them record the call. If you want to do that, I think you have to let them know if you're doing that over phone, and do this to like really learn and determine like, is there a problem that people care about, and figure out if that's something that's what you want to do. We can go on the next slide. So another couple tips are to question everything. So if something sounds interesting to you, you can ask, why is that way? Great follow-up questions to ask to get people to dig deeper beyond just surface level questions. And it really helps if you can be truly curious and be really passionate about learning about the problem or the user that you're trying to help. Of course, you can find multiple patterns, and this can help show you maybe there's a new problem that is more interesting or more important than you thought, or maybe that what you went in, you're thinking that like, oh, people need ways to work out on their own, but people actually just want to find groups to work out with together. So you can have these new insights that you find if you truly listen and find the patterns across your interviews. Next slide. A tip from the design thinking handbook is to use the what, how, and why tool. This is a tool you can use to dive deeper beyond the surface level observation. So you can start off with a column with what and look at what the user is doing, and then you can dive deeper and look at the how. How are they doing these things? Like, how are they practicing for their sports? What are the exact routines? And then why? And then you lastly look at why. Why are they doing that way? And kind of looking deeper into their motivations and their emotions, and see what are the biggest and most important parts of the things they do. Next slide. So preparing for interviews is also something that's really important. You want to figure out the most important questions you're going to ask, and try and make them diverse too. So you want to make sure your questions are getting at different big ideas, so you can make the most of your time when talking to your users. I think another thing that's really important is asking good questions. So there are a lot of pitfalls actually when doing interviews. I think I have it on the next slide. Can you go on the next slide? Shoot, actually on the slide afterwards. So some good questions are on. Oh, can you go back? I'll just go through sequentially.
Oh.
So another couple tips before we get there. Encourage and ask for stories. So it's really key to ask for specific times when people did something. Like, don't ask like, how do you usually practice, or how to usually, take care of your mental health. Just ask for like, when was the last time you did something? Like, ask for the story. Like, it really grounds their answers in the concrete, so you can learn from real world evidence versus like people who are like, I even do this sometimes. Like, I talk about things that I want to be, but like not exactly who I am. So this is a great tip I wish people told me earlier. You can also look for inconsistencies. Like people, like I'd imagine you've all been part of an interview before, or like kind of some kind of survey, and your answers are going to be, uh, it can be different than when you're asking them, if that makes sense. Uh, don't be afraid of silence. Let people take their time, and it's really powerful to let people just to think a little bit without having to rush them to make their answers. So at this stage, it's really important to uh, get neutral answer, like ask neutral questions. Don't suggest an answer. This is the stage where you're kind of going out and figuring out what problems are out there. So nothing is set in stone. You're trying to just like figure out what people actually care about when they, you know, exercise or are taking care of their health. So go on to the next slide. So generally for interviewing, I like to do like three different parts of the interview. Like one is just being human, going in there, doing a little bit of small talk, like building rapport, having a conversation, getting to know people a little bit, just like sharing about where the people are, what's their background, and being able to share a little bit about yourself, and then going into the questions and then looking for the stories. Like I said, prioritizing like concrete examples. And lastly, we also really want to focus on feelings to figure out what's really important to them. Like, oh wow, this was like really, really annoying when I did this last time. Like I wish someone would fix it. Or it's just like, this is just such a tedious process. Like if you can dig in deep and figure out what those things are, then I think you'll be in a really good spot. Lastly, I think there's also a pitfall of like talking too much about your ideas, or like, oh, I think it'd be really, really cool if I had like an app to connect, like a social network for dogs or something at the beginning. Like, do you think this is a good idea? And I think that kind of part distracts from the empathize process, because we're going there to learn about the users and empathize with them without projecting too much of our ideas onto them first. We just want to learn and see what is important to them. So here's some examples for some good and bad questions. So like, not the best questions are these. Like, do you think this is a good idea is a common one. Like I've even asked this before. In some situations it can work well, like if you're asking a mentor or someone who can give you honest advice. But many times what happens here is people will just like it's kind of like asking for sympathy, where people will always say yes, it's a good idea, like it's really cool, but it's kind of like the just to be nice kind of thing, and it doesn't really tell you too much. Like, would you use it as a similar version of this, and like how much would you pay for it is also very similar. These are like it's really challenging to get good answers to this. Some good questions to ask are like, tell me about the last time it happened. Asking for the stories, getting the concrete examples, and why do you bother? Like, figuring out how important the problem is to someone, or maybe it's not important at all. They're just like, oh well, I actually shouldn't be spending so much time on this. And what else have you tried? This is a great answer to see what other alternatives are out there and how you can start. Like, gives you a little bit of brainstorming for the solutions. Like, what kind of solutions would you even use to solve this problem in the future? So I think now we're going to go on to the breakout room soon. You're going to get some practice. The goal is to empathize with someone, to learn about how they watch sports games. Like, what is it like to be a spectator? Like, how are people watching sports? Are they watching them on Twitch? Are they watching it on like TV? Are they watching it alone with family? And finding insights about what kind of problems or challenges are out there with watching sports. So when you go into your breakout rooms, you'll be paired around groups of 5 to 10 or so with a facilitator that's going to be running the room. You'll be in there for about 10 minutes. So you'll want to get in there, get to know your facilitator a little bit, develop some interview questions together, ask them, do a practice mock interview. And finally, end the interview professionally, like thank the facilitator for your time. and then you can like share your findings with the whole group when you get back. Thank you everyone for participating in the breakout rooms. We're going to do a quick little recap before we go on to the define section. I believe Anika and Brendan are students that have volunteered to share some of their responses, some of the learning, some of the questions they thought were really good in their calls today. So could we have Anika start off with sharing if she is here?
Yeah, so we spend a lot of time discussing together about the differences between watching games and online and in person. And like a major part of it was like that sense of community and interacting with everyone, with whether it's friends, family. When you see a game in person, like there's so much hype and excitement, but when you watch it online or on television, usually we would probably invite some friends if it's a major game, but during COVID, like you can't even do that. So yeah.
Yeah, that is great. Good. I'm happy to hear that you've learned and picked up these unique insights. I think those are like two different avenues that you've established that you could be interested in pursuing. Like, what if we could improve the viewing experience when you're viewing alone? How could you build some community there? Or like, what if then you go on to define something about uh, how you can make the group viewing experiences better? So that's really great. Uh, I guess next up, real quick for Brendan, if you're here, could you unmute and
Yep.
share a little
Right.
too?
Yeah. So my breakout room asked really good questions. They were talking about, or I was telling them about how my experience in person is just so much more beneficial for motivation than during quarantine, where I can't go in person. And a big part of that is just the atmosphere of the in-person, uh, like sports games and that type of thing is just so much more beneficial for getting me up in the morning and going on a bike ride or something like that. Whereas nowadays, the form of sports that I'm witnessing are just on television and don't have that kick to them that get me motivated.
Yeah, that is a really great insight too. It's like, what is the inspirational value of like, what if we can make this inspirational effect of sports more helpful for us to achieve our own personal goals? Like, could we use this as a tool to help us be more healthy for our design challenge too? That's really great. I love it. Yeah, thank you, Brendan and Anika. I guess like last parting advice is like, yeah, I hope this was helpful for everyone. These are some tips and insights you can use to get the most out of your interviews and be prepared for them. The other thing is like there's a great resource out there called the Mom Test, which is a book that someone wrote about like how to do these customer interviews, how to reach out. So I think if you can look it up, you can probably find it online for free on a website called LibGen, which I'm sure many of you have heard of that, but that's a discussion for another time. I guess now moving on to the define section. Amy, you got it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, David. That breakout room was really fun. All right, so we're moving on to define, which is the next step of design thinking. So defining is when we take what we got from empathizing and translating it into needs and scoping a challenge. To define, we first need to focus, which is narrowing things down rather than focusing on like things that are outside of our range. We need to understand, and this means getting to know our users and what specifically they need. And we also need to develop, which is creating an actionable problem statement that's focused on the users and their specific needs. Nextly, specifying a meaningful challenge to address the insights that we have can leverage our design work, and this is a fundamental thing to creating a successful solution. All right, and the define mode is very important because it explicitly expresses the problem we're striving to address. We need to reframe our challenge based on new insights we've gained through our design work in the empathize step, and we use this reframed problem statement as a solution generating springboard. So we also need a really good point of view, which preserves the emotion and the individual we're designing for, includes strong language, which means like it's really clear what you're communicating, and that ties into sensical wording, so like clear communication. and has a strong insight. So what you're saying is really obvious to whoever is reading it, and it can go in a lot of possible directions. So now focusing includes scoping, which is selecting, framing, and communicating the intentions of a design project. A design approach can be inserted into many forms of any project. For example, iterating and making low resolution prototypes, which is not the final prototype, is useful in any work that we do. We have to speak to people for we're designing for, so that's what we did in the previous step. And we started practice by using design techniques in any project, just practicing. So how do we start to use design? The most important thing is to take action. An important step of human-centered design is to start doing. We should start designing by integrating new behaviors and mindsets into our work before we need to launch our practice. Declaring that you or your team will be using a design approach can help bring intentionality to the way we work and give permission to people to try on new behaviors. However, this declaration should be paired with meaningful action. We should use pieces of design before doing a full project. You might have learned that human-centered design is like a process, like this five-step process: empathy, define, ideate, prototype, and test. But you can also use elements of design piece by piece. We should get going without waiting for the right time or right project. You should talk to customers, set up our space to facilitate a way of working, even if it's digital. Could do it through Zoom. Jump into brainstorm sessions, synthesize information visually to build towards our insight, and this can be done through like Google Jamboard or maybe group chat, Google Docs. Make a quick prototype and then show it to someone. Integrate design methods like these into your work and build towards your goal. And then once you have success there, you might want to take it up a notch and then start thinking about more projects. Then you can do it yourself before telling others to do it. Get in some design cycles and then do some practice work before managing other people's work. Once you get your own practice in, then you can start including others. So who should we use design for? We should use design for human subjective challenges. A human-centered design approach helps us excel and understand how people think and act, and then we further use this understanding to bring new clarity to the challenge by reframing it. The value of this is not only relevant in problems that have to do with people, but circumstance and culture. A human challenge might not be a consumer project. Just think of the people who are involved in your challenge and how to include them in your work. Then we can use design for discovery. Design can be used for all types of diverse work, but it's most easily adopted for discovery phase of a new project. When are we still seeking the meaningful problem to work on, or the right solution to pursue? So when you do take on a project, choose one in its early stages or one you really want to develop. Then we use design to question assumptions. You might have experience in the challenge space and some type of solution, technology, or response. But design is really powerful here as an intentional approach to testing your ideas. How about our first real project? We should take on a product or service challenge, not a strategy or systems level challenge. So we want to start kind of small. Select a project that we can imagine being solved with singular products, services, experience, or campaigns. So you don't want to make it too complicated. Pick a project that's important but has space for experimentation. So this is what I mean when I say it can go a lot of different ways. It should have real consequence, one where success and failure really matters. It should have enough for you to do to make it right. Then you should choose a project focused on end users. So these are the people who you're creating for. Designing things for people to use is the most basic version of design if you really boil it down. Designing things to help others create for, sell to, or serve others takes the complexity up. Even if your direct customers are not the end users, you might still consider focusing on our end users. So how should we really scope out a design challenge? In general, there are two things we should think about: constrain the challenge space and broaden the solution space. Constraining the challenge space is a narrow framing of what we're working in. It makes the project actionable and allows the team to deeply understand one aspect of people's lives. And then broadening the solution space is an open design challenge where one is neither the solution or the form of the solution is known. The solution could be a physical product, a new interface, or some improved service offering. And we want to avoid embedding assumptions of the user's needs. So in the same way, we should avoid presuming the solution. Watch out presuming the user's need. And this can be fixed by just interviewing them, talking to them with clear communication. We also want to scope for excitement, which is creating challenges that are meaningful and engaging for our team. We should take on a challenge with enough depth that we would likely surface compelling new information by speaking to and serving people. All right, so now that we've had a very brief overview of defining, let's move into our breakout rooms. And in our breakout rooms, we will be exploring a problem statement that's kind of relevant to your challenge in FIRST Robotics. So it will be, because of COVID, many sports involve team players and interactive sports. These are not able to take place. So from this, we can define doable projects with realistic goals and review existing alternatives. And we should think about the following questions. Who is it for? What is the need? How many people need it? What insight did you get from the users? And why does it matter? And so just introduce yourselves if you don't know each other already. I'm not sure if it's the same breakout room. And then just think about any solutions that might happen, and then we can discuss when we're back in the main room. All right, Benjamin, would you like to share what your group discussed?
Sure. So we kind of broke down the problem a little bit in terms of ways that we could help individuals hone their skills remotely, and how they could do so together as well. The quieter room, I think we had some really good ideas. So one person mentioned ways that you could practice like shooting or dribbling a basketball remotely, and kind of practice together, but in your own spaces, which is a really great idea.
Cool. It was awesome that you guys got to discuss your personal experiences as well. Sounds like someone plays basketball in that room. All right. How about you, Lydia? What did your group discuss?
So my group discussed that when they're playing sports, they really like to have fun. And so because of that, we still wanted to see if there was a way to do some kind of group sport where you're just not super individual. So we were trying to brainstorm ways that we could make it safer to do sports to distantly but safely do group sports, I think. So yeah, we have a few ideas, but we're not like 100%, obviously, just brainstorming. So yeah.
Cool, glad you guys had fun. All right, let's see the next slide of this presentation. So for the homework, after this session, it will be to choose a problem you would like to focus on and develop a clear statement of the product concept, scope, and capabilities. And then if you guys have any questions, just feel free to drop them. And yeah, I'm glad you guys could come here today, and I was glad to meet you all. I'll just go back to the homework slide right here. Yes, there will be more sessions, I think next week.
Yes, I'll cover what's coming up next and sort of how the homework relates as well. So I'm not seeing any questions. I'm going to pull up my next set of slides if we don't mind. All right, so again, if you come up with another question, try it in the chat and we will be happy to follow up with you through email. But we're going to keep moving along here and talk next about Intellectual property. So these materials are adapted from the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, which is a federal agency for the U.S. And I'll talk more about that in just a moment. All right, when most people think about intellectual property, they think about patents, when actually it's a lot more than that. So intellectual property is the creation of the mind, embodied in a form that can be shared or enable others to recreate, emulate, or manufacture them. There's actually 4 ways to protect intellectual property. The first is a trademark, which protects marks in commerce that indicate the source or origin of goods or services. The next one is a copyright. This protects the original art in a tangible medium. And then we have trademarks, which actually protect commercially valuable information. Last, we have patents, which of course protect inventions. Patents are the reason that we wanted to bring this IP session into our first session here of our 6-week program, is because we really hope that you, in your innovations with your teams, will actually be a solution that could potentially be patented. So we want to start planting this in your brain, and we're looking forward to seeing what comes out of your solutions. So I'm going to go over each of these briefly. So trademarks, again, allow consumers to identify the producer of a product or service, but then which often influences your buying options, buying decisions. And on the other side, trademark owners are also encouraged to provide products and services consistent with a certain level of quality. And so here are some examples of a trademark, which of course can be a logo or simply the name in just words. And additionally, in first robotics competition, we have trademarks too. So some trademarks are registered and some are not. So gracious professionalism, cooperation are registered trademarks. You can see the R after them. But we also use the coin the term, the ultimate sport for the mind. And that is actually not registered. But because we've used it, we put a trademark symbol on there and it's not registered. There's some level of ownership there. So another type of IP is a copyright, and this protects original artworks, songs, books, movies, sculptures, audio clips. What's interesting about copyright protection is, again, it's actually automatically created when you first publish your artwork to the public. So the copyright symbol can be used again with or without registration. And thanks to technology these days, it's difficult to upload music or videos to YouTube, TikTok, or other mediums without the use of copyright, so to avoid infringement. Our next area is trade secrets. So this is any information that derives an economic value, such as formulas, programs, methods. There's no set term to this as long as a trademark is there's reasonable efforts to preserve its confidentiality. One of the most famous trade secrets is a Coca-Cola formula. It's actually kept in a purpose-built vault in Atlanta and actually is a tourist attraction. Another example, it's getting close to lunchtime here, is the secret ingredients for KFC. So KFC's original recipe was actually in Colonel Sanders' head for many years, and eventually it was written down and stored in a safe in Kentucky. Then many of our robot teams are familiar with this. You may not know and think about this, but WD-40 has a special formula that is not public common knowledge. It's not public, and actually in the WD can, it doesn't actually list the ingredients. It may list what's not included, but doesn't list what's included in the ingredients for the can of WD-40. So moving on to patents is last, but certainly not least. Patents are, for US patents, I should say, they're granted by the USPTO, the United States Patent and Trademark Office. And patents are registered and enforced differently across the world. There's no single international patent across all countries, to note. And as well, I think the thing about patents is it doesn't give you anything to have a patent. What it does is prevents others from making, using, or selling your patents for a limited time. And of course, you must disclose your patent invention to receive a patent. Three types of patents are utility, design, and even a plant patent. On February 6th, we have another Saturday workshop where we're going to have a patent attorney dive into patents. And as a teaser for that session, utility and design patents are quite costly to file, but a provisional patent can be filed for literally a few $100s. And this gives you essentially a 1-year time from the time that you publicly disclose that to file a utility patent in the future. So you've got 1 year from public disclosure, so which actually would include your judging here in the innovation challenge. So just wanted to make you aware about that 1-year clock if you're choosing to go through a provisional patent. But I would say, I'm hoping, again, this is planting a seed, because it would be absolutely amazing, I'm sure, on your college application to have a provisional patent filing to share with the world. So again, more to come in a future session on patents. So to put all the IP pieces together, let's look at a Google Pixel phone. Trademarks include the Apple logo, Google logo, which we're all familiar with. The product, of course, is the Pixel. The Android and Chrome are software trademarks. And the processor is actually the Qualcomm Snapdragon. So there's a trademark for that as well. Copyrights could include, of course, the software code, instructional manuals, or a ringtone. A trade secret, which is not just clearly for this mobile phone, but is the Google search algorithm is actually a trade secret. So again, there's no patent for that. They want to keep it as close as possible to maintain that economic value of being an industry leader and in searching. So possible patents for this phone could be the utility patent of a camera, the IC chips, the display, speakers, and such, or a design patent, which is the overall form of the phone, the placement of the buttons, speakers, the housing, and even the surface finish or the coloring, perhaps. So that's a high level kind of where all the different intellectual property elements come together in a single device. So thinking more about mobile phones and looking at Qualcomm's 5G innovation, which is actually more than just mobile generation, it really enables innovation that leads to invention and leads to patents. So I kind of want to walk you through a quick history of technology. So starting off with 1G, long before many of our students here, back in 1982, 1G was introduced as a mobile connectivity for analog phones. And of course, no data. That innovation progressed to 1992 with 2G, where digital wireless technologies were established, and the ability to text message, which was extremely innovative in the 90s. And 3G came along in 2001, which gave rise to smartphones, mobile internet, and GPS tracking. So again, 20 years ago. And in 2012, 4G enabled high definition streaming in entirely new industries like ride sharing, for example. And in 2019, and what we have today is 5G. So this enables billions of devices to connect in ways that never before imagined. And Qualcomm was the leader in establishing the 5G standard, and actually was the only US company in the international community to lead that effort. So we are all very grateful for that and what comes with 5G. And as well, we really want to thank Qualcomm for leading innovation to not just the 5G technology, but bringing innovation to our first tech challenge and our first robotics competitions teams through the innovation challenge. So to wrap up with patents, I want to talk about some additional resources. I've mentioned the USPTO office, again, our materials today, which will be available to everyone, including the recording of this. The materials for IP today were based on the USPTO. There's more resources available from the Silicon Valley region USPTO office, which is one of 4 national offices across the country. And additional opportunities specifically designed for FIRST students include, as I mentioned briefly, February 6th, we have our first California workshop series. We're going to plunge into patents with a patent attorney from KLA. There's going to be a great session. We additionally, the first Innovation and Content series has episodes planned in March. The dates are not yet confirmed, but there's going to be demystifying the intellectual property. We're going to have some patent education information with the USPTO. So again, lots more information available. And we're going to, again, make all of our slides available in the video recording of this session as well. So we want to wrap up this great session and start preparing for our next session next Saturday, which is ideation. So congratulations, you've just completed our strategy and navigation session. And of course, we are grateful to learn about design thinking and how we can empathize with our users, how we can drill down and start to define what problems are and problem statements. And that's actually part of your homework for the week. As between now and next Saturday, we hope that you will take these tools and work with your team and teammates and mentors to identify what your problem statement is going to be. What are you going to tackle as a team for the innovation challenge? For next week, we hope to see a diverse set of teammates. We'll talk about that in the ideation session, how it's important to have a lot of different minds coming together from different backgrounds to come up with some amazing ideas. And so next week, similar to this week, we will have some breakout sessions. We'll probably have additional time for breakout sessions next week as well. And so one thing to know about next week is we're starting at 10 a.m., 10 to 12. And our session next week is, again, as I mentioned, we're going to not have as much of the overview of the overall program. We're going to start to dive in and dive deep into ideation and working with you and assisting you to prepare for this Innovation Challenge program here. We're grateful for next week for our partners of Raytheon Technologies, and again, our friends at the Stanford D.school to be our key presenters. And I want to say we're super excited to have you here with us. This is the first session of 6. We hope you can join us for the remaining 6 and really use, between Saturdays, get your homework done, come prepared, and let's work on the next session of learning together. And we're super excited to have you. And I wish I could give you a high five. I'll give you a virtual one though. And so what we have some additional time. We wanted to, Aine Shivnan from Qualcomm is available to talk about her career, her role at Qualcomm, and and more inspiration about how to become an engineer like her. So please stay on the call for that. And in the meantime, we need to drop off, we understand. And I know we've got some team opportunities coming up, but we hope to see you next Saturday. We will send out a separate URL for next Saturday, a separate Zoom link for next Saturday. So please stay tuned. And we really look forward to seeing you and appreciate your feedback and hope you've had a great time with us.
I should mention that Aine has at least half a dozen, 7 patents herself, so it might be a great opportunity to ask her some questions I see popping up in the chat here about patents and how that process works. And is Aine back on the call?
I am. Hello, everybody.
So yeah, there's a whole bunch of thank yous, so I have to scroll back up questions.
Yeah, I missed it too.
Yeah.
Here's a patent idea.
Yeah, right. So let me throw out, and probably folks could just unmute at this point if they have questions for Aine at all about anything patents or Qualcomm, 5G. Feel free to unmute and ask away. Gotta be something out there.
What'd you do?
I don't know, Velma, what'd you do?
Anya, I have a question that my students have asked a lot of me. I had a robotics team is, how often do you have to renew your patent?
So there is a constant process of maintaining the patent, and it takes a number of different forms. There are things called continuations, because as you can imagine, if you have something that applies to a situation today, things are always evolving, and so there may be some new additions. And when you're filing the continuations, you can expand or additional claims. And of course, not all the claims are so wonderful the first time around, and so you may not pursue some and add some others. So we have quite an engine at Qualcomm that keeps that process going, and you get new people that are working on the patents on top of the technology that includes those patents from a few years ago, and of course they're continuing that expansion.
Aine, is there like sort of a standard time so there's the provisional that gives you sort of an up to the year to get your actual patent. And is there a set time frame on a patent, or does that vary from patent to patent before you have to defend for an extended period of time?
So Teresa mentioned there's the year between provisional and then getting your utility application filed. Then different jurisdictions of patents have times when patents just expire. And I believe the US is like 20 years, but then other patent jurisdictions might be slightly different. So that's why it's a very, it's a living effort, right? You have to keep going and renewing and continuing and developing new things. And of course, with the technology leap every 10 years in mobile, you can't avoid it in any case, right? It's just happening naturally.
Anya, what are the key features of patentability for the ideas that are generated? I mean, even in this session that we had, there were a number of different ideas that got kicked around. So what are the key attributes that Qualcomm uses?
So, a lot of things to think about is, why are you patenting? And obviously we're big contributors to the various communication standards, and we have a lot of patents which are called standard essential patents, which are required in order for the standards to actually be implemented. So those are important, and a phrase that's used that somebody with skills in the art should be able to read your patent and understand what it is you're trying to do. That's the whole idea of patents. You're giving information to others. It's important to be, how applicable is it? How obvious is it? Sometimes the best patents are the most obvious ones, just because it's a speed to the idea. And I think that's often what can stop innovators from patenting something, because they say, well, it was so obvious to me, everybody's going to think of the same thing. But that's not always the case. So you shouldn't just decide just because you thought of it that it was too easy and I shouldn't patent it. Being able to show that it is that specific patent that's at work in a particular technology, how easy that is to define or detect or whatever can be a factor. All kinds of things. And of course, it lines up with our business goals as well. So patents are for enabling products and making sure that you're capturing the great ideas of your employees.
So Anya, I've heard the term your patents is only as good as your lawyers. And I'm just curious if you could talk a little bit about, because you see things online where you can like, oh, Phil, submit for a patent online but how protected is your product really? I mean, how much goes into really protecting a product? Like what does Qualcomm put into protecting their patents? Probably more than just an application, right?
Sure, absolutely. So we have there's a number of our patent council folks that have strong backgrounds in engineering. So you get these people who have been engineers for years and they find themselves moving into a slightly different, and they go and study patent development. And so our patent council needs to understand the technology space that we're operating in, what's the right language. They're excellent contributors. So when we have our review boards and we have engineers and we have patent councils, there's a lot of great back and forth discussion. And it also helps our engineers, they don't have to be the lawyers. And that's important. We can keep them doing engineering work, and same then for the lawyers. They don't have to be engineers, but they meet in the middle and can speak to that language. And they're a good initial test to make sure that the patent will explain what you're patenting in a way that somebody, an expert in the space, can review. So. Yeah, I would hazard a guess quite a few of our patent council have past engineering degrees.
So Anya, I mentioned in your bio about you on the Qualcomm Women's Leadership Council. Yes. Can you kind of explain what that is and what your role is?
So, as we all know, over the past number of years, there's been a discovery that maybe I and many of the women on this thing knew that, having more women engineers was a good thing for your company, but through various reasons, there isn't the same population. And that goes to speak to diversity in general, right? That's an important thing for all companies. So what we on the Women's Leadership Council, we provide kind of a sounding board to the larger organization to understand how business level decisions or shifts and moves that we're making in the organization may be perceived, or how we can bring ideas forward to the organization to help increase the diversity, not only in our incoming cohorts, but within the company itself. And specific challenge in tech companies has been helping that growth of mid to senior level women, and to keep them in the tech space and moving forward, so that we can have those leaders up at the top level. So it's been very gratifying just to have a company that cares about that and then has us to get advice and give advice.
I have lots of questions I can keep asking. So maybe without, and maybe this is too soon, and maybe you can't talk about it at all, but I have to ask, what's next, right? So 5G is sort of launching right now, but where are we trending, right? Is it just speed, or like what does a future look like for?
I think that the big thing that we're getting to in 5G is the intelligent connection of things, right? So so AI becomes a natural thing to kind of bundle with that, and for different aspects, potentially managing the quality of connections, but then also maybe managing the level of information that's transferred over those connections. So a very simple example is having smart secure cameras. So instead of just having a stream of you're outside of your window where nothing happens for 2 weeks, and then suddenly somebody comes by. Just being able to have prediction and classification going on with actually what's seen in that scene. And then of course there's always 6G. So, but I think that's kind of where we're very focused, obviously, in getting 5G. There's rollouts across the world and in some regions within the US, and but then making it smarter. That 10-year lifetime, we'll say, of generations involves a lot of refinement and performance improvements that will continue. And then one of the other things I was saying, when we think about sustainability, these other G's, don't go away, but we get smarter about what they're used for. So if the majority of people from a communication and streaming and connectivity are moving to the next G, what can we use that spectrum for? And so that's where a lot of the sustainability and underserved communities globally, and as well as in the US, can be leveraged for connectivity and enabling of that. So there's a nice mix that things don't get left behind and unused.
Awesome, thank you.
I think this is pretty good in terms of like what we're doing right now in terms of like defining a problem. How at Qualcomm do you all like really identify what the public needs the most and what to work on next?
Yeah, that's it's always a difficult question, and there are often competing ideas even within our own organization, and but a lot of times we're big, we get data, we do work with and listen to what research institutions are pursuing, but we do try to make sure that we stay within our core competencies, right? There's no point in Qualcomm getting into fashion, for example, right? That's unless it's the next smartwatch. But so there's always has to be a thread to our core competencies. How is it making what we already do better? A lot of what we focus on is, kind of a premium tier focus. We make, the thing that we're working on the best possible. We also think of ourselves as a systems company. So we think end to end. We're not just making a modem, or we're not just making a camera chip. We're thinking about how are all of those things connected together so that the experience end to end is the best it can be. And then we look at, okay, what can be taken and applied to automotive, for example. And we've made some big moves there where, our in-car connectivity now, there's a lot of our technology being used in that. ADAS, which is, assisted driver or accelerated driver assisted systems, where, the car, for good or ill, is able to understand that it's drifting lanes. I mean, you see this in many different ways, but that's taking technology that was developed in a mobile format and moved over. And then you take that technology and, there's new challenges just because it's in automotive. So the problems tend to come at you, and then you have to kind of refine which ones you're going to pursue.
That's very interesting. I never thought about it like that before. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah.
Hello.
Hey.
All right, thank you. I just have a question, please. So when you do develop your product, right, and you like have it in process, you're creating it, how do you sort of get the public to sort of understand your technology? How do you like get the PR? Because I know for 5G, right, that's a big issue, right? Just like getting people to understand it. So
yes, so it can be challenging. We think of our communications per audience, right? So we have our customers and their needs, and of course we have a different level of communication with them, and there's big partnerships with phone manufacturers and carriers, and so together then we're creating this communication and story. There are always ways that the information can be maybe not quite understood, and we just stick to, this is the facts, here's the science. We do the testing. If you lived in San Diego, you've probably seen a Qualcomm test van driving around. And we test, and we're the first to, share that information with standards bodies, for example. So we try not to just go it alone, right? It's about having the community of industry and with us, and there's only so much we can do about some consumer level concerns, but again, it's all about pointing people to the information and the tests that are done.
Thank you so much. You're like the best VP.
Oh, you made my day.
Aine, there's a question that came in from the chat, which is how much is 5G dependent on the infrastructure built out to support it? And is Qualcomm involved in that infrastructure development?
So we're not an infrastructure company, but this would be one of the partners that we would engage with, so that the names escape me, but there are so many infrastructure companies that are working with us to get 5G technology out there. And of course, it's not a new from the ground up build, right? Each of these generations have developed on the older ones. So there are at least for the there are three different spectrums, and so for the initial long range one, that's just leveraging current 4G infrastructure, for example. And a lot of our technology transition has been making sure that we can fall back to 4G if some of the 5G infrastructure isn't as complete as it needs to be. So we support it through our products that our customers integrate into their infrastructure and so on. All right. Yeah, exactly. I see Ericsson and Cisco make infrastructure. Nokia, there are names that you wouldn't hear or be as familiar with. And so all of those customers and of course it's the end-to-end, right? You're also working with the phone manufacturers as well.
Aine, I have a question, since we have so many young people here that are very impressionable. What do you think, what would be your advice to a middle to high school person who thinks they want to get involved in technology in the future?
So I think yay is my first response, and just don't lose that that curiosity. I think that's what when I look back over my career, it's like I couldn't have told you 10, 15, 5 years ago what I would be doing, but I was always trying to pursue something interesting and challenging. And engineering is a career where it's the future is constantly changing, and that's exciting. And if you like to be confronted with puzzles and things to figure out and problems to solve, engineering is going to bring that into your career without even looking for it. And so it kind of feeds on itself. And so that's why I think it's a great energy boost. If you think about working for most of your life, how great to be in an environment that's going to constantly require your mind to be figuring something out. So I remember as a kid, my older brother, who is beyond smart, was very concerned that his brain was full and didn't know what else he could fit in there. Well, we talk to him now, and it just seems to keep expanding and more things. So he's forgotten more things than he can remember at this point.
Yeah, I think, just in our world and how quickly things evolve and grow, it's like we all have to be a lifelong learner. If you're you think about teachers today,
yes.
Teachers had a big learning curve this year, right? Yeah. And as well as, many other people in professions, and how to engage in our new world. So yes, and I think what I love about FIRST is, and then like the program we put together today, I think our mentors and our adults as well are learning things and constantly. Yes. So yeah, I think excellent point.
Right.
I have a question. So, what's kind of like the process you guys go through to like actually create the product? Like, you can start off with an idea, but what's like the criteria that you guys like use to actually, so you take the product and then you do testing on it and then manufacture it. But like, how, like, what's the criteria that you guys like use to say, okay, this is a viable product that we can actually start like testing and manufacturing?
Sure. So, we it depends on, how big the product is, but almost any idea, has to go through the proposal and what impact are you trying to make and what kind of investment is going to be needed and what kind of expected return. Are we building on something that's already there, or are we going to require some new big uplift to occur? Um, and this is where we rely on, I guess the body of knowledge and the smart people, but we do financial reviews, we look at competitive information, and we see how far along in that competitive, how far along are others, and does it make sense for us to be in that space? Does it connect with our core competency? And let's say if we check all those boxes and say, yes, we want to move forward, well, then there's a plan. And for a chip, for example, there's a tape out to take the design for that chip and turn it into silicon. We have to design test platforms so that when that silicon comes back, we can put it on a large breadboard, for example, so that we can test it and put it in our vans and take it out and test it. And so then there's a long plan and a major program with thousands of people operating on it, that take it from, maybe the first thing would be an engineering sample that we would give to some of our customers to try out in a small test case. And then we would take feedback from them, roll it into another version of the chip potentially. And there's always a projected plan for, when it might show up in a new phone or something like that. So we've gotten fairly knowledgeable now about the cycle from idea of new features that need to be put into a phone chip, for example, and how long it will take for that to show up into a product. So we have to tie in with our customers' timelines and their go-to-market plans. So it's a big machine, as you can imagine, for something as large as ours.
Okay, thank you.
So we're about at 3:10. I know, I just again want to kind of appreciate Anya for taking some additional time. And this was clearly an optional session, but a lot of interest. We had a few hundred people in the session. I think that we greatly appreciate your time and the support of Qualcomm to, again, make this innovation challenge possible. I know that everyone is super excited, not as excited as most years, but we're making the best out of the opportunities we have.
Right.
So I guess I'll just wanted to wrap up here and let people get a little bit of a break before I'm sure you're diving in with your teams this afternoon to get started.
All right. Well, thank you for having me. It's been fun, and often the best innovation comes in times of challenge. So I expect to see great things out of this.